Good morning and welcome to another tropical update from Cayman Hurricane Center. I'm Adam, and this morning things have relatively calmed down after Lee and Maria had transitioned into an extratropical system and is making its way through the United Kingdom. Invest Area 99L had moved through Florida and had uh, produced rain and a few gusty winds, but has not developed and had actually weakened out. And the only thing left to speak about is the several disturbances in the central and western Caribbean. You remember I've mentioned about that tropical wave that was in the eastern Atlantic, and there was some sort of potential for some development out of that. It was pretty low and unlikely at the time. As I mentioned, there was supposed to be a priest that was to break off and move west-northwest while the main bulk of the wave moves off towards the west. Well, the main bulk of the wave will be interacting with the monsoon trough that is developing and starting to move through in around the Caribbean, the Western Caribbean, as well as the surface trough of low pressure in the Northwestern Caribbean is continuing its merge with the monsoon trough. There's also a area of low pressure in the Eastern Pacific that's also associated with this monsoon trough, and that is also looking like it will potentially develop on that side. I'll mention why this has a bit of importance to what is going to go on. But here we go. This is the satellite imagery of the area. The tropical wave itself in the central Caribbean, located generally more or less along this line here, moving off towards the west. The surface trough of low pressure pretty much sitting here in the extreme northwestern Caribbean Sea. And of course, we have the monsoon trough that extends over much of Central America and down into the Caribbean Sea. Now, all of this here, plus the area of low pressure along here, will all be interacting with each other, and they'll all be flaring up the thunderstorms and convective mass over the Western Caribbean. Thus, there is expected to be a lot of rainfall and a lot of flooding issues for areas like Jamaica, Cuba, the Cayman Islands, the Yucatan, Belize, Honduras, Nicaragua, Costa Rica, and even as far south as Panama. So all of this area will be experiencing a lot of rain, a lot of thunderstorms, a lot of stormy weather for this upcoming week. And so yeah, it's something that we'll have to monitor very closely. There is quite a decent chance that this thing could develop. Finally, the National Hurricane Center had made mention. Here's the initial 5-day formation probability, and for the time being, they're leaving it as low. But again, this is very preliminary, just been brought up. And so overall, it's really the whole entire area there that needs to monitor the situation, but don't necessarily pay attention to the actual circle, but just keep note that that is there. The National Hurricane Center is giving it a 20% chance of development over the next 5 days. Also taking note that pressures are lowering in the area, but no definitive low pressure as of yet. In terms of the conditions in and around, shear levels are somewhat decreasing. A few small areas of small pockets of higher shear, but overall, shear is not too terrible, and it is expected to get better over the next couple of days as well. Another thing to take note is the very, very, very high ocean heat content. Pretty much swaddles the central and southwestern and especially northwestern Caribbean Sea. And this too will also take in play with what this system does in and around the area. So, what I want to point out here now is I want to bring up a blank chart, and I'm going to play this out based on the forecast guidances that are out there. Their ensemble members looking back at previous storms based on seasons with a cold neutral to La Nina active hurricane season, and a lot of the conditions that we do have this year, and also using knowledge of these monsoonal system developments and put it all into a chart. So let's take a look here. I'll do it in that color here. Right. So we have our tropical wave, as per mentioned earlier, that is moving westwards into the Western Caribbean. We have a surface trough of low pressure along here. We have a surface low along here. And we have this monsoon trough. So this is what's going to happen here. This low will probably develop into a storm, maybe even a hurricane, as it generally lifts out of the monsoon trough and heads off that way. The monsoon trough itself is continuing to build, and it is also lifting north to northeast. This surface trough of low pressure will pretty much meander around the area, maybe slightly drift a little bit to the west, but overall getting itself entangled into the monsoon trough. As per mentioned, this tropical wave will be moving west, and generally speaking, we're looking at a low pressure area. Let's mark this here. We're expecting generally a low pressure area to develop off here. So with that being said, what is this low pressure going to do? Well, it's going to be lifting northwards. The pattern up over the United States would and out in the Southwest Atlantic would allow for this thing to lift northwards. The other factor that will determine its track would be the monsoon trough itself. This monsoonal gyre, the overall large spin. Basically, what this will do, the overall flow around this monsoon trough, the center or base of this monsoon trough will be located in and around this area here. And so the flow around this monsoon trough, again, think of it as an elongated area of low pressure. So the flow out of this will be as such that you have these cyclonic winds, around this area. So with that being said, well, this thing will move north and maybe a little bit northwest, maybe a little northeast. Again, it just really depends on how this orientates. Now, what's likely to happen is that obviously with this low pressure developing, the tilt of this will probably go from a northwest to southeast, from a northwest southeast to a southwest northeast tilt. And as it does so, it probably would let the low pressure area drift a little bit more west northwest and north, and then maybe north and east, and then maybe ending up somewhere along this area. So definitely high risk potentially for anywhere from Jamaica, Cuba, Bahamas, Florida, um, Cayman Islands. But again, this is not set in stone or anything, but just using previous data, what previous storms did this time of the year on an active season, plus looking at some of the forecast guidances and looking at the overall situation, the most likely situation for this system is to generally move off towards north and then probably north and eastwards. Of course, there's always the possibility that the system drifts more west-northwest, pulls into the Gulf of Honduras, then lifts through the Yucatan Peninsula and then up and out. And there's also the possibility that the low ends up pulling north and east. But the more likely situation, rather, would probably be more down that middle route. Not to say that the other two aren't likely, just maybe slightly less likely. But again, we got a lot of time to go. One of the key factors in determining exactly how the track will go will be exactly where this low forms. Say the low forms down here, then again, your most likely situations would be this or say this. If the low forms up along here, then it could go either way, that, or that, or if it forms within this area here, then your likely situations will be that, or maybe even that. So, and it just really depends on where exactly this low does form. Looking at surface observations at the present time, it is indicating of a sort of broad spin. Nothing too defined as of yet, but just more or less, this is what we're more or less looking at this point. There are pressures within this area here that is lowering quite substantially, or rather lower than usual, but no definitive low as of yet. Again, this is something that we'll be monitoring very, very closely over the next several days. This thing is expected to be more or less a slow mover, and not expecting it to enter this region here until, say, maybe by the late week or even into the weekend. So again, we have a good few days to watch. Despite having a good few days to watch, though, there will be a serious concern for rainfall, whether or not this does develop. If it does develop, then much more so the case if it remains just a broad area low pressure. Still, rainfall a serious threat. Jamaica, Cuba, Bahamas, the Cayman Islands, the Yucatan, Honduras, Nicaragua. This whole entire area is going to be seeing copious amounts of rain, and of course, with the rain, flooding is a concern. Then the obvious mudslides, landslides is an issue there too, as well. So I'd say for areas such as the Cayman Islands, Jamaica, Cuba, the Yucatan, Belize, Honduras, Nicaragua, you guys should watch the situation closely. listen to your local weather services for any watches and warnings that may be put out, and heed the warnings as they do come out. Stay safe. Do your own preparations to get prepared for this. Again, it will be a bit difficult to do as such as it's already uh, raining and even small localized areas are already seeing some small flooded areas. But do what you can and try to especially ramp it up by midweek to end of the week just in case. But yeah, so this is going to be an interesting situation, guys, and it must not be taken lightly. Whether or not this develops into, just a tropical depression, or whether this develops into a full-fledged hurricane or a full-fledged major hurricane, this is something not to be reckoned with. The situation altogether, again, look, looking on satellite, there's nothing really going on that impressive at the moment. And again, this will take a while to get going, as most monsoonal storms do take a few days to get going. But once they do, it would prove to be an issue. So keep a close eye, listen to whatever your National Weather Service says. I'll be back with another update, hopefully with some more detailed maps. I do apologize. I would have brought up the vorticity and the up-level wind data. However, that data is not available at this time. Hopefully, a little bit later today, I'll have that and probably throw on another update if there's any changes to make note of. But yeah. That's it from me for Cayman Hurricane 7. I'm Adam, and I'll catch you guys later.